Got it. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for asking. My days are pretty close to the earth here. I'm in a moderately secluded, semi-deep nature space.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a very deliberate and committed, I dare use the word routine. And I operate from something very simple for me at the moment, the last 10 months, this PPP, prioritize personal peace at all costs. That's been my mantra. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a rare gift to give myself among many great gifts during my lifetime, but this is a very sacred one. When, of course, as you know so well, in the world is praying and hoping and screaming and crying and catharting and banging their head against the indoor wall, the outdoor wall. We can't say enough to even find language to describe the kind of toxic cacophony, if you will, of the world,
Mm-hmm.
And by way of segueing into this second conversation with you for this very important sacred book, an offering to the world in a time of madness, it's so almost undeniable, unless you really got your head either buried truly in the sand or buried in the sand of the propaganda machines. If you look around, feel around, and pay somewhat attention, obviously we're not on the ground in Gaza, we're not on the ground in Israel, we're not on the ground in Ukraine, we're not on the ground in Russia, we're not on the ground in Burma's genocide, we're not in the political prisoner cells around the world. We're not there, but we know and we feel.
Yes.
And so in this great context that we're in, call it planet Earth, 96 million miles around Mother Sun, orbiting every 365 days or so, they tell us, in this infinite intersecting tapestry of multidimensionality, we find ourselves aware of contexts, consciousness, the dilemma of consciousness. And then much of our conversations and much, I think, of our own personal investigations is the felt study of consciousness in context. And then we inhabit belief systems and emotions and conditioning to, kind of talk about a very 101 psychological perspective. But then the next thing you know, we are moving and talking and emoting as adults from these proclivities, these conditions, these belief structures, these formations, the cognitive, the emotional, the psychological, perhaps even something that's beyond and deeper than the existential, the mystery intelligences, the spiritual intelligence. And so here you and I are talking in conversation through our respective conditioning, our impulses, our biology, our educations, and trying to use very precious, timeless words and emotions, hope, inspiration, sacred activism, caring, empathy, the archetype of the benevolent feminine, the mother, and we're trying to do our best to communicate the evidence of those timeless, beautiful principles here in late 2023 as the world further seems to expand and collapse simultaneously, and give people, hopefully, a felt possibility of that innate quality that we both live and thrive by, this empowerment to both overcome, to use your language, the enslavement, the conditioning of the comfort of enslavement. Say no more about the passions that men and women feel for singular murder, oppression, torture, set aside so-called wars and democracy and the manipulation of information. Genocide is a pretty timeless massacre of both the animals, the trees, humans, and generations. It's just littered with that, carcasses after carcasses, blood. So my point is trying to offer some context for this conversation. And I read your questions and your concerns and your feelings. I really thank you for taking the time, and I really let them in last night and today, had them printed. And let's start with self-censorship. That's keeping it right there at the confluence, if you will, of believing in that which is being censored without even knowing that it's being censored. Okay, and so this self-censorship, do you mean by that, Krystal, that there's some consciousness of it being censored, or that it's conditioned and where you're unaware of it? There's denial, cloaking it, masquerading it. What could you say something more and take your time about this quality of it doesn't sound like we want to be censoring ourselves. So it's inspiring to hear that. So let's go into that and expand from there over the course of this conversation, if you will.
Okay.
What does self-censorship mean to you? And how can we feel it, know it, perhaps challenge it, and why that's important?
I think self-censoring happens on many levels. And it happens through our conditioning. So we're censoring through our filters. And sometimes those filters are involve not wanting to lose people, wanting to be pleasing, wanting to maybe keep our relationships, keep our jobs, keep our friendships. And then there's the self-censoring that mirrors the big propaganda machine, as you said, of how we are indoctrinated to naturally self-censor, because we pretty much live in a world, I feel, that is self-censored through what's now become a simulation. So I see it as a whole construct, like an overlay over top the truth and organic nature and humanness. And this has gone on for eons. There's a purpose to it. Of course, it's accelerated now, and we can see it more. So I don't think anything is worse. It's just being revealed, and all the cracks are showing. And so we spoke last time a little bit about the self-censoring, and I said to you, well, I was raised to have this sutured mouth, and it was to be pleasing. You can't show up with how you really feel, and it may not be acceptable, or it's too intense, or people won't get it. And so there's this, before you say it, there's this self-editing and censoring, this halting of your original voice and what you want to express. And of course, that's supported by the whole society now more than ever.
Thank you for that, and very revealing, very compelling and provocative together to embrace in some felt level the language, the frequency, the resonance of how you, I, others interpret self-censorship. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm listening to you and listening to me in this kind of simultaneous kind of intersubjective space of a proactive truth-telling experience of being, like the opposite of self-censorship. And I'm assuming self-censorship often is unpleasant truths or feared expectations of being judged or shamed for being true to these vulnerabilities, these uncertainties, not belonging to the club of patriarchy or whatever it is that you feel that there's a conditioned need or an appetite for, not to mention doing things against our own ethical integrity because of I don't want to vilify capitalism any more than we often feel it in our own lives, but this incessant demand for tangential exchange to survive, to live, to just, to kind of, so we've got to, in some way, keep down passions, keep down experimentation, to herd ourselves into the day-to-day existence. But the positive, my point is, and I'm a little bit, I so infrequently speak, so I kind of find myself speaking with you here. The proactive, truth-expanding presence of being, and I'm 3/4 of the way through the question here, just as a foundational set of ideas. My teacher in Burma, the late Seda U Pandita, we had a series of 9 conversations, or was it 6 before he died in 1996 or 7, in that area. And he really spoke a lot during that week, that 9 days, of the meaning of being a true human being. And so much of experiential Dhamma, not Buddhism, but Dharma, Dhamma, which is the conscious engagement of consciousness in context with consciousness in confluence with the senses. It's the study of states of mind, SOMs, SOCs, states of consciousness, and their interplay. Danny Goleman, who popularized emotional intelligence, EQ, I introduced him to U Pandita many years ago, became a longtime student. He and Danny, at times myself and U Pandita, he made it clear, even in a book that we did together, this book I'm referring to, the Dharma of Reconciliation and Mindful Advice for the People of the World in My Country, he spoke about EQ wasn't enough. And he brought up the issue of SQ, spiritual intelligence, and we brought it to mindful intelligence, which is really about the beauty, coming back to you, of non-censorship, but of courageous, ethical, spiritual engagement, learning the tools of the vocabulary and the pronunciation of freedom, on why freedom is preferred over contraction. Mm-hmm. And so you study meditatively the energetics of the things that you do in consciousness. So you feel the unpleasantness of censorship. And the more you feel that, the more kind of upset you feel. Mm-hmm. And so my last point here is that in the West, with to use your phrase, the woundology, the pervasiveness of, I would say, marginalizing, if not vilifying, stress, anxiety, depression as being something wrong with you. And there's the scapegoating of culture being the problem, rather than seeing that it's an existential crisis of consciousness, that it's inherent. And you see that as like, wow, that's really good news. I'm censoring what? My ethical, spiritual, dharma, mindful intelligence, which is, I have a higher priority to liberate myself from fear, greed, and delusion, not ideologically completely, over any accomplishment in the world. So these two words, these two states of mind, as my point, U Pandita pointed out, without an individual being aware of these two Buddhist Pali words, hiri and otapa, moral shame and moral regret. And they're known as Lokiya Pala Dhammas, the guardians of the world. If individuals do not hold those two states with high regard and learn their intelligence and their emotionality, their conditions, one will censor. And he goes on to say in the book, if one censors, guess what happens? You grow comfortable in the delusion of safety, mistaking slavery for freedom, and it metastasizes, to use a very poor word for me, into arrogance, pride, narcissism, and a fetish at times for patriarchy and the pathology of violence. So many of the leaders in the world are self-censoring their spiritual intelligence, he said.
Interesting.
And that's sort of his take on the inner dynamics of that process. And I want to bring it out into the open in our conversations and to our shared book with Summer Starr and you, and to the readership and to the people who will listen and feel this as an audiobook, is that, wow, because I read so many of your notes, and it's like, you're such a believer, it feels to me, and help me with this, on not pointing your finger at the darkness, but this deep impulse in you for forgiveness, reconciliation, gratitude, caring, motherhood, creativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're a woman. You understand in evolution the feminine. So do you wish to share some of the evidence of where creativity again and the components in your own heart, mind, and soul in your home that might go, I'm going to feel better by empowering truth over fear? So anything at all on those, if there's something in that long commentary there, but I feel that a conversation, long form conversations, their beauty for me are just that, natural communication. Like, and my last point here is, I think, and I'm speaking, I guess, I'm answering this for myself. Without this divine other, they call it in Buddhism the Kalyanamitta friendship, truth tellers who don't collude, may not be global activists, but they bring it right home to their tribe and say, hey, girl, hey, guy, let's prefer expression over censorship.
Absolutely.
So how would we go back? How would you go back in the practice of not censoring yourself? How do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do it in your art, in your voice, in your relationships, in your family?
Well, it's been a long process, and I've had along with other aspects, I've also had a focus on it, because I knew that was a conditioning that I had. So that was, that was the grit I had to use to work with this, to bring myself out. So that was, in other words, one of the aspects or tendencies I came in with to dissolve and break free from. And so no accident that then I would choose being an artist through words and paint and expression and awareness. And when you said, when you were reading over my list of questions and you saw this divine feminine aspect of the gratitude and the forgiveness and the reconciliation, and so you highlighted that, and that just seems naturally intrinsic to me. But as you spoke it, I thought, oh yeah, that's true. So, and what that does for me, those are tenets through which I become disentangled from the self-censoring, from the indoctrination. And so that I'm not in reactivity to that, trying to fight it or push it away. What I want to do is see that, oh, that's there outside, that's there inside. And so I want to disentangle from it. I'm aware of it. I'm aware of it in me as it arises. I see it as a purification of that aspect. And so I witness it. And so I don't judge it. I don't identify with it. I don't tack on another narrative that would crystallize it and make it cling to me. I see it all as I'm watching it release. And with some of the deeper embedded aspects, it's not a one go. It's like layers of it. But I've become more skilled over time at working with it. And so I feel everything that I use to disentangle myself from that narrative of the conditioned, of the indoctrination, of propaganda, I think, like, in the path, the yogi path that I studied with decades ago, they called it this primordial taint that we all come in with. It's this ontological guilt. And so it's this self-censoring, this self-hatred, not honoring our preciousness or our worth. And so if that's there, if that's just intrinsic to the human incarnation, so I don't want to fight against it. Again, saying that, I don't want to fight against it. I want to free myself from it. So I'm going to create a new path, a new bandwidth of a higher frequency expression and a way to work with it and beautify my mind and radiance my heart as all ways to liberate myself and to come back to my original humanness, which is to be not just a mental, emotional state of love, but it's like we are flesh and bones, but we're actually molecules of this cosmic infinite love. And so I want to build and reinforce that.
It beautiful. It brings up a similar kind of emotional tonality and content for me when I'm listening to, like when I met Aung San Suu Kyi the first times, she was very similar in word and tone to what you're saying. And I learned a lot about spirituality, dharma, dhamma, conscience, to use a universal term, consciousness and conscience and dignity in action. She coined the phrase love in action, by the way. Metta in Burma was the integral part of their revolution of the spirit. And one of the things I learned from her, which it's taken me a long time to keep inhabiting it, is it's a common phrase, especially when you're an activist or a politician or a leader. It's like you take it off others. Was a common take it off others and keep it in an intimate, interrelated ubuntification of shared space, of a kind of sacred reciprocity, and be very disciplined with watching for expectations. So take it off of other, sacred reciprocity, and be disciplined with expectations upon other. And so no matter what your intention is, she said, like our teacher, or we shared a teacher, Sadhu Pandita, when he talked to me about conscious speech, speaking from a truthful place at the right time, with the right choice of words, with the right intention, being careful with tonality, and super careful with expectation. She said, the more loving we are in our expressions of revolution in Burma, often it's more threatening in my interpretation, they're all men, to the male pathology of dictatorship and totalitarianism and toxic leadership. You know, and it's like, what, like a fear of intimacy. Maybe that's something that we all know, but for them, it's a fear of like losing control. It's like an orgasm that never ends that they don't want.
Right.
They just take them from their day job of killing and oppressing and spreading lies around the planet. And so when I think of like patriarchy and toxic patriarchy and this divine feminine, it's really this sense, this deep sense of how much can the male and the female, how much can we as revolutionaries of conscience and consciousness elevate what U Pandita told her, speak to why it's beneficial for other to live in peaceful coexistence. It's like your family is better off, you're better off, the people are better off.
Absolutely.
So taking it off other is like really, and last point is doing what you can as a kind of pioneer, as a political psychoanalyst in a way, an activist, revolutionary, is how to coerce the consciously the substratum of the toxic, violent, dictatorial patriarchy of Burma and other places around the world that use violence as right, to see the wisdom of benevolent leadership, which is learning the art which most people understand, that talking through our differences is far better for everyone than making loot on the weapons industry and seeing blood and babies and people and lives in the name of lies and propaganda and democracy and justification and terrorism. Everything is so fucking bastardized today. We're dizzy with labels, but we can see the blood on the TV screen. We can hear the screams. And there's no beginning to this horror except the wisdom of reconciliation, which comes back to you again, the wisdom of peaceful coexistence, the wisdom of the feminine, talking, loving our differences, and just opening our palms and hands rather than closing them with the fist of drones and missiles. And so it's so simple, I think. Like, it's just the absolute lack of spiritual, mindful, and emotional development.
Yes.
And it's something we can't quite inspire around the world to catch on, like a positive, elevating tsunami, if there is such a thing. Wow, man, woman, it's like so rad not to make money by killing and in the name of. It's like, who's going to stop the war? I think I'm going to do it. Let's go to the United Nations tomorrow, G20 leaders, and say, no, it's done. It'd be so simple. And I beg of you to imagine with me here. I know these are words that we're sharing, and they're practical and wise. I dare put you on the spot, and I'm not intending to, but what is a way or two to get to catalyze inspired leadership with existing leaders? Hey, Mr. Biden. Hey, Mr. Netanyahu. Hey, Hamas. Hey, Mr. Putin. Hey, Mr. Xi Jinping. Hear me. Listen. What would we say to them? That they might respond and go like, whoa, 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 whoa. I want to belong to Krystal's club.
Tall order with the leaders. But I feel that, as always, to be role models and trailblazers of truth to call other people in, we have to dismantle that in ourselves first, because we all have it, because we've been put through the system. And there's always more layers to open of the heart, more layers of that enslaved mind to dismantle. And so I feel that as we raise our frequency to more of that beautiful love substance that is the truth, then we can be those role models. And approaching the leaders, I mean, I feel that they are so deeply into this. They are so indoctrinated. They are so controlled. MK Ultra'd, the program, the ultimate program. And that could be through bullying, blackmail, being seduced by their own greed and lust for power. I don't know. I don't know about them. But I would say to everyone else to join in this place of looking within and dismantling our own inner patriarchy. And at the same time, it's important to realize that we are being lied to. We are being steered and corralled, head on into this new world order, which is eventually, they just want complete control and domination and annihilation of our spirit. And so it's important to do that inner work and recognizing, when we're in that state and, when we're projecting that pain onto others or wanting to displace blame because we can't bear to look at that pain in ourselves and that place where we're still enslaved. And I feel that one vehicle to do that is liberate yourself through self-expression. And if you've got that deeply conditioned to be self-censoring, because we're just even part of that system that naturally wants that and grooms us to be that, is to engage in, sacred acts of expression, just as a way to begin to, thaw the freeze of that void and where we've been tamped down. Because our natural beauty and our natural elegance is that expressiveness, is being and coming from and living in that deep heart and sharing that with others. And I feel sacred acts of expression, like painting in a certain way that's guided, and writing and poetics and everything that beautifies us, but also as a way that it dredges up everything that isn't love so that we can look at it and release it in a non-violent way and in a non-therapeutic way, because I feel it's organic in us to release these programs and to self-purify into our original state of love. And that's what's going to change everything. Because I feel that, with what the leaders are doing, I mean, that state of toxicity and, rule by fear and domination and, false narratives that make everybody afraid, we have to raise the level, because then that violent frequency can't exist in that much love. So I feel it's turned back to the people. We have to do that in order to collapse that. And so we have to do our own work. And then as role models, if we're in that position of that kind of new sacred leadership, of course we have to do our own work, but that's where we're leading others. That's where we want to call others and invite people in. And first, people do have to understand that this is what's happening. And you have been lied to. You are being played by masterminds that cleverly structure everything. And they know what they're doing. And they don't care about you or I and the collective. They just we're just something to be used in their malevolent scheme of domination.
Interesting. Since most of my kind of study around politics and leadership and revolution, nonviolence, the dilemma of when is violence required as a defensive response to murder, oppression, genocide, like in Burma, a bit of time in Yugoslavia during the war. So much of these issues are so intrinsic in the fabric of existence that, like in Burma, it's a multi-religious philosophical country that's predominantly 80% Buddhist. And my late teacher, the Seda U Pandita, was one of the architects of nonviolence in that country. Aung San Suu Kyi was one of the leaders, but many other leaders were also students of his. Mm-hmm. And I remember him telling me quite a few times that because Burma was so dominantly indoctrinated by a succession of male dictators post-World War II, and so violently oppressed, like two forms of violence. One is the propaganda of trying to control you without violence, but if you don't believe, you damn well better subjugate and cower no matter what job you do. And if you don't, you're going to be imprisoned or tortured. And they follow through with that. The other form of torture, as I was explained in Burma, was through radical coercion to an untrained mind who takes up the toxicity of greed, deluded, oppressive-based work, occupation. And so the coercion of money and power, that's another form of torture in Burma. Mm-hmm. And then it's a very small handful of men and families at the top. Like in Burma, there's like only about 50 families that control 54 million people. And so much of the money is in the hands of those 50 families, 1,000 people. And so the issue becomes, he said, you can't really break through the mindset that's so entrenched, although when you beat people sufficiently and kill them and torture them, the whole country begins to rise up, which it's doing now. Mm-hmm. But it's, so he turned, my point is, he turned to teaching children early about the power of mindful intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and what he called ethical wisdom, ethical intelligence, the power of generosity, of right speech, of mind training. And so he started the children's summer course in Burma throughout the country in monasteries, where it was really sought after that children of all forms of families, both lower, middle, and upper class, wanted to come for a month or two to be trained by the nuns and the monks in spiritual intelligence, mindful intelligence, because he was ushering in his own activist way, a new mindset. And I know that's a long-term approach, but rare do you even see that within the so-called nuns and monks of any Buddhist country or any religious culture. Mm-hmm. And so he took a very different approach. And then Aung San Suu Kyi kind of played with that because she was both a revolutionary and then became a leader of an elected civilian government. They're all imprisoned, as you know now, because of this dictatorship and the mindset of that. And she just coined the phrase, take it off of other, be mindful not to vilify other or demonize other, and one person at a time. Mm-hmm. Wherever you walk, talk, sit, and go, communicate the evidence of what you said earlier about how are you living in the virtue of your dignity, your integrity, your love of freedom. That was a key thing for her. Let's speak about our love of freedom, our love of peaceful coexistence, our love of the comfort of writing books that won't be censored, to speaking things that will be shared openly. And I'll end here, like we're going back to earlier here with self-censorship and censorship. You may have read that Dr. Naomi Wolf, she posted on X today, formerly Twitter, that her Daily Clout IO media site, it was completely taken down. The last year of all content on Facebook was completely without notice by Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, just completely deplatformed, and contributors as well. And anyone who had contributed were sent messages of you're violating Facebook's policy. This is all based on Pfizer, the documents that she and her team of lawyers are looking at. I mean, look at our country, look at America and North America, look at the communism, socialism, totalitarianism under Trudeau. He's a foot soldier of Davos. But what's new, right? So here I am criticizing the elites. Come on, Alan, you can't even walk your own talk here in a book of conversations of walking your own talk. So it brings back the issues for me of not only where do we go from here, but I just had the thought when you're talking about your creativity, it's like coupling that with take your skill set and get out there, Krystal. Let people come close and nurture those things that you know in yourself about how to use your heart, your hand, your pen to overcome censorship, and giving people support to what? Get on stages, to record themselves, to get into groups. And the last thing I want to mention, I was aware of this early on because my daughter met Aung San Suu Kyi when she was 6 or 7. After Aung San Suu Kyi was released, and we were invited to San Francisco when she was awarded the Václav Havel Award of Creative Dissent. We went down. And when I would have my daughter often on weekends in Vancouver, and because of her love of the arts and things, I believed in there was no form that she had to conform to. And so that meant putting newspaper and anything on the floor, giving her pens, her brushes, and the paint. And girl, there ain't no wrong art here. Go for it. And I never had that training. I kind of got seduced by this neurotic OCD of penmanship. I'm still obsessed with notes and notebooks, and I think that's a conditioned control mechanism of growing up for the first 10 years of my life in a 32-foot trailer being pulled up and down the East Coast by 2 family members who were in the military from base to base to survive the claustrophobia of 4 fucking adults and 32 foot of aluminum. You damn well better get that pen down and never pick your head up. But colors and arts and forests. So, I mean, I'd love to hear it. I know this isn't something, this is fun. But, what are some of the top 5 ways that you inhabit releasing yourself day to day? The yoga of liberation of consciousness, those inner asanas. Do you care to share some of those? What are your nature? Or do you get up every day and just throw paint on a canvas? Or do you write no matter what you're feeling? Is it black coffee or tea or green tea? Or what do you do?
Well, I write every day. I've had a writing practice daily for 25 years or so, and where it became daily. And
Wow.
that's a mainstay for me.
Wow,
And
that's inspiring.
yeah, and I don't do journal writing or the morning pages or that kind of thing. I just do intuitive writing, and I'll get a prompt of, write this today, or I need to be told something from the divine, and I'll write it down. Or now I take an iPad because I write in a cafe. That's where I like to write rather than at home. And I used to take tons of books and lay them all and they'd be like my little inspiration prompters. But now I don't. Maybe I take one book, but I take my iPad because I can look everything up. And so and then I just write what I feel I'm to write that's inspirational. And plus, I've been working on this Sacred Arts method for what, 16 or 17 years. I've been researching and putting it together and really honing and crafting, as well as doing that within myself. So I'm always like writing about that, because I feel that when I get out there in a bigger way and guide souls, I take it seriously. And I want it to be really meaningful. I want it to have depth. I want to guide in the right way that is truly liberating, because I got a message a long time ago, because I was in the healing arts for many years in various ways, nutrition, energy work, and all of a sudden I got a message one day that I had to do something that was enduring. And in terms of energy work, I didn't need to touch people anymore. This voice said, it was when I was doing some nutritional consulting in a clinic. And on Fridays, I was doing spiritual mentoring sessions with people. And one day, this inner command was, you don't need to touch people anymore. You can sit across from them, and your talking with them will be healing and transformative. So there's that. And then I always knew I had to bring in art. And as a child, I always made art. And I grew up on a farm in southwestern Ontario, and middle child of 3 girls. And I don't know, I was just kind of forgotten or something. And so I was always being creative and imaginative and, roaming around. And that was the way that I nurtured myself. So I always had an active imagination. I was always creating art. But because of my self-doubt, I thought, well, I'm not really an artist. And so that kind of went by the wayside. But it was always burning in me, like I had to return and do this art. And so it was about 5 or 6 years ago, I really started to pick it up in earnest. And I studied with, different teachers doing different types of art: intuitive art, art of allowing, intentional creativity. Another one in Israel who does like medicine art. And I was just like prolific, just going for it. And I thought, because this is what I want to bring on board. In a retreat, I want to build the energy of doing self-inquiry writing and dyad inquiry and creating art and writing poetry and really guide people through this deep process where you build the energy and people have these spontaneous breakthroughs, epiphanies, energetic releases, frequency upgrades. I had this like big vision. And so that's just part of who I am, is creating art and writing and walking in nature. And I don't have a lot of people in my life, and I tend to gravitate to just intense conversation, of the mystical, of unearthing these patterns and going for it. And so I have a daily talk with a dear friend about this kind of process. So
beautiful.
That's my life.
Thank you for sharing that. Just such a feast, a cornucopia of ideas and visions and energies that inspire wanting to dive into their meaning and how they're expressed. And sacred art for the last 15 years. I mean, someone hears that and feels that, like, what is that as a daily discipline, as a portal into your heart, into the world? What can you say more about that, and anything else that you're sharing that gets a little bit down deeper and more full about what they look like? How do you go about them? What are some of the ways that they manifest? What is sacred art every day, writing like that for 15 years? What makes it art and what makes it sacred?
Well, what makes it sacred is the place I do it from, because it's like deep feeling, deep reverence, wanting to unearth an insight into the sacred mystery of the divine, of the cosmos, wanting to understand myself at deeper levels, wanting to unearth all the patterns and issues that have created suffering in my life. Because I had this awareness like really most of my life. And even as a child, when I went to Sunday school, I thought, well, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm not going to get true teachings here. I don't know how I thought that. I mean, I was a real little kid, but it just showed that I kind of came in that way. And so I've always been searching and questing, but this writing, and I always knew I would write a formal book. And people say, well, you write every day. Why aren't you creating a book? And I said, well, when I do publish something, it won't be because I, Krystal, want to be an author. It will be because people need it. And so I feel like this book project that we're all on together, it's because people will need this, because this is the time, right? And they'll need other things. And
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. May those who feel and read your words, may they not only be inspired, take what's there to be felt into their own heart, mind, and relationships, but may they seek you out. And to the extent that you're available and you are there in some way, indirectly, formal, personal, group, collective, anything that you choose as a form for you, may that evolution of expression be met with those who really want to know more and more, how can I bring this into my life? I'm so there with the captivating splendor, if you will, of communion and this synergy of people learning from another, curiosity, the bravery of breaking the patterns of my kind of my conformity, my false certainty, and like creativity is like, wow, I'm inspired to live and to learn from life and other.
mm-hmm.
And set aside the word mentoring or even teachers, but just curiosity as precursor to like, wow, I'm so down with what I'm reading about this woman. I want to meet her. I want to read her readings. I want to know her art. I want to know, to the extent that I can learn from her, the intelligence, the artistry of manifesting that art, the good, the bad, the splendorous, and the difficult. I mean, I love reading about those artists who are willing to share the artistic creative process. I'm just taken aghast at how dedicated some of them are.
Absolutely.
Going into studio when they're billionaires for 8 months without their family and their partners, where all they do every day is just like make up lyrics and give it a go. And they got a producer, a sofa, a microphone, and all the loot they'd ever imagine. But there they are. And not to mention how many 99.9% of all artists out there, whether you're a writer, a musician, a singer, a painter, a dancer, a poet, an actress, a spoken word, unknown, right? Some boy or girl in the basement in Berlin right now making things on his or her Moog that parents think, shut up. Next thing you know, it's like, they're, the next great trans technological wizard artist with 20,000 people in Ibiza listening to you DJ your own original tunes, whether that's success or not, or learning the success that you're in your place and you're digging your own art, like you, so humble.
Well, I feel art exalts us. It exalts and it frees us. And when I'm doing it in a particular guided way that I've been taught, and also that I'm adding to what I've been taught. I mean, when you start to splash that, well, because you have a background of being a painter, but when you splash that paint on the canvas, I mean, it is so freeing. It's healing and liberating. And then in the process, they talk a lot about encountering that inner critic. Well, what is that inner critic? That's just an arm of that enslaved mind, that self hitting that up against that wall of self-censoring. and then to work through that is just so liberating. And there's often the ugly phases that we encounter when we're making a piece of art. We go, oh, and I should scrap this. And when I encountered that, I just thought, whoa, start over. And then, but I have a great tenacity, and I was determined, and I thought, I'm not starting over. I'm going to morph this into something that's like exquisite and beautiful, and speaks of the soul encounter that's
beautiful.
here. So it becomes
Beautiful.
transmutational and so healing and so releasing, and just that. And I know too, when I first started painting, I had this awareness, like I wasn't focused on myself in the same way. Like somehow it liberated me, because I was getting so fulfilled. I cared less about myself in a particular way. That was good, right? Still took care of myself, had my walks in nature, did whatever I did, but I wasn't deriving or trying to get this fulfillment from me, or crafting, Krystal in a certain way, whether it was her image or the whatever. I didn't care. It was transformative.
See, this is what, despite the popularity of vilifying Western culture, primarily America, as toxic, I quite find that it's everywhere in the world is toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it's Earth. I've been in dictatorships. I've been in war zones. It's like, give me New York City any day. Give me Vancouver any day.
Mm-hmm.
And what I loved about my life in the West, and even here in Bali, which is radically artistic, creative, a long tradition, is that it had music, it had dance. We are openly allowed sensuality and sexuality and music and concerts and crayons and paint and theater and movies and Jimi Hendrix and Janis and Led Zeppelin and all the various iterations, expressions to this very moment now, that, wow, get to live the life of freedom in a democratic culture that's imperfect. Coming back to the word gratitude for you, rather than point of origin, projection, source of trauma. Gratitude for the toxic fucking creative culture that we're born into, rather than, okay, let's go into, I was born into Tibet, post-Tibet, where Chinese think it's cool and sexy to rape nuns. Mm-hmm. Whoa, now that's a pretty severe environment. Burma today, guess what? You even allude to freedom or democracy, you're in jail.
Yeah.
Tortured. So my point is, it's like, wow, turning adversarial contexts into hyper radical self-respect, gratitude, impetus, courageous expression, overcoming adversity, to throw that paint down, even if you're cathartic. My last little point, though, just came to mind when you were talking. I lived in Paris for a short time, 2 or 3 years back in the day when I was screenwriting and books, and my publisher for The Voice of Hope with Aung San Suu Kyi was Edition Stock in Paris, and I went there after I left Burma, and back and forth to the Zagreb and Sarajevo. But anyway, the point being is that I loved art, and Paris is like, whoa, everywhere you look and feel, you can just, whoa. And the way that people dress, and even the crazy areas, it's like, whoa, they've got that aesthetic feel. That's my projection. And anyway, so I'd go to the museums, all the classic, but I was really fond of sculpture. I gave my hand at it in high school and a little bit in college, but the Rodin, the great sculptor. So I'd go there and hang. But I read a biography about him, and you may know this, but he was so fond of his older sister, and she was to be married, and the man to marry didn't show up the day of the wedding. And obviously he broke her heart and really crushed young Rodin. He was so identified with his older sister, it just broke him, apparently, according to what I remember reading. I'm not sure if it's how true my memory is these days. But mom and dad didn't know exactly what to do. They were Catholic apparently, or they had an affinity to the cathedral. They took him to the priest and said, maybe this is what's happening. He's in an utter depression. We're concerned. And what did the priest do? He somehow felt intuitively or through conversation, he had a proclivity, or maybe he had a training in this, but he gave young Rodin, of all things, Krystal, clay. Clay. And he gave him a little pot of water and showed with his hands what semi-moist or hardened clay feels like without moisture and water. And I just imagine, what would it be like for a young, depressed, perhaps even suicidal young teenager, like so many millions and billions around the world, right? And adults, and those who mask these feelings that are called leaders. Beneath it all, there's probably a terrible self-hatred. If they're human, that would be the good news, rather than just pathological sociopaths and so on. But so young Rodin went on, obviously, to become one of perhaps the great sculptors in the world by beating the shit out of hard clay with moisture and angst and depression and fear. At least that's my fantasy. And I can so relate to that. So relate to me catharting through chess, catharting through painting, catharting through athletics, catharting through sex as a teenager, a young adult. But it was where else do you do it? Catharting meditatively, catharting on dance floors, catharting on acid, to the point where nothing was satisfying anymore. Not my music, not my art. I quit school. I quit the West, and I said, fuck, I've got to face myself inside. I can't keep pounding things that don't transform me in the way that I have to be on Alan. So meditation, consciousness on consciousness, to face yourself and to feel the virtue of those things in you that you vilify. That's right back to what you're bringing up. It's like the transmutation is turning enslavement into a superpower of empowerment. We need to get passionate about that edge. Overcome the long-term, I need to be with a psychedelic assisted, low, medium, high dose in a clinic with blindfolds and psychotherapy. I need to spend 20 years in training to overcome. Fuck that. You're depressed because it's a virtue. You're stressed out because it's a virtue. Just almost bear with the rant here. And it's like art. Art is like, where's art therapy, right? Where is spoken word therapy? Where's poet therapy? Where's intimacy? Whoa, what about someone like you, goddess Krystal, savant artist? Hey, woman, any way you want to paint and write, guess what? You want to take your iPad and just throw it against the wall, you're safe to do that. Just have to buy a new one, but if you got the loot, go for it. Nothing's off the table, in other words, is my point. And that kind of Dharma teacher, those are rare in our artistic. I couldn't speak. I couldn't write. Not that I ever wanted to speak or ever wanted to write. I just fucking wanted to live my life without the fucking craziness of the Western toxic war culture and conformity. Conformity to fear-based toxic crap. That's where the psychedelics snapped me out of the coma of that. You can do it, dude. And that's all someone needs is you can do it. And here it is. Here's your, you got sacred art and the safety of your expression. No one even needs to see it.
Absolutely.
You want to reveal something that's so embedded in your desire, fear, shame cellar about your fantasies, about whatever. I think that's rad art, rad poetry, rad theater, rad painting, rad writing. To say that which is like not just politically censored about vaxes, that's, thank you, Naomi, for your courageous work, but like really spoken word and art that is so utterly provocative to the mainstream conformity of the propagators of enslavement. That's why I love art as vehicle for revolution and peace. Spiritually incorrect for me was my liberty, not books. theater was the optimal environment where you could basically say anything you want. And you may not have people stay in the theater, but guess what? Absurd theater, activist theater, we all know that. It's like, there's no better place for me to be a revolutionary than on a stage, symbolically and literally. So that's my art form, is coming uncensored with trying to make people laugh. Mm-hmm. Like redefining comedy and satire. Anyway, that's a big rant, but it's like I'm inspired by hearing what you're saying and feeling the rarity of that. And so it's my way of acknowledging and honoring. And if we can go on here with sort of what you brought up in your notes to me, and is, I love the word gratitude, Krystal. It's not a comfortable emotion for me. Mm. And so would you like to share whatever you wish to share about the word gratitude and its value to you?
Yeah.
Its meaning? Take your time, please.
Gratitude, the way people often use it, like keep a gratitude journal, or what are you grateful for today? And it's always about all the good stuff we're grateful for. But wait a minute. If you want real transformation, let's be grateful for our challenges. Let's be grateful for all that darkness we see in ourselves. Let's be grateful for what curveballs are thrown our way in the world through relationships or financial struggle or disappointments. And when you can go into that underbelly of that kind of what people don't like to look at because they think it's so-called negative. But when you go into that and the premise is, I'm grateful for that. You may not feel grateful in the moment, but you say, I'm going to stick with this gratitude thing and I'm going to be grateful. And why would I be grateful for this? What is it for me? You can begin to see those challenges, changes, losses, sorrow. They're a catalyst for liberation, because they can take you through that eye of the needle where you enter this chrysalis of metamorphosis through that gratitude as a high art. And you could even speak to that gratitude of those challenges and see where you end up by emptying your mind, and emptying your mind through the pen, and emptying your mind through what you might put on a canvas. And to be grateful for that which isn't popularized as being grateful for, I feel that's where you find the gold. That's where you dig deep and you can have the deepest transformation of your own inner darkness. And you transform the dark to the light. And that's the gold. That's the gem.
May beings all over our precious planet hear your wise words. May beings in the future, not yet born, feel into the wisdom and the words that you're sharing. They're real, true, from my humble place of where I sit, true treasures and gifts that are rare in this precious planet. So it's a beautiful place to stop and to reconvene in our next conversation, if I can. Thank you for the gift of your life, the gift of your dedication to consciousness and the craft of caring enough for your interiority and to move your mind and hands and body to express it through art, words and painting, and this upcoming book that we're sharing, this art piece, not a book. So from my heart to yours, thank you, Krystal. What a gift. What a beautiful conversation from where I sit. And thank you for your wisdom and your inspiration and your time. And let's leave today where it is, unless there's something more to say from your part, and I give it to you. But if not, we can convene here. But want to defer to you if there's anything more that you'd like to say, or to tie up, or to conclude for this second conversation. Please take your time if there is.
Well, I'd like to say that it was a beautiful conversation because it brings out the beauty of what's possible in these times and how we can use these times to beautify our mind and to radiance and open that deep, deep heart and just shatter that worldly heart that's been filled of the superficialities of the world, and to really go deep to get the richness flowing in our life. And that's the deprogramming part of it, truly and deeply. So I want to thank you, Alan, for setting the conversation up this way, because it's just so dear to my heart. It's the life that I walk. It's the life that I want to help others walk and really assist in just transforming people and having more love pour onto the planet by pouring it into ourselves and radiating it out to one another.
Beautiful. Well, may I ask you openly a question that just came to mind? Is that I feel the same, and thank you for reflecting back. It's a very rare, beautiful, inspiring conversation. They all are, but this is very specific, and it also hits a very important moment on planetary collective. So is it acceptable to you that as a taster, teaser for the upcoming book, that we post on my Facebook page this video as a sense of what people can be looking for in the short term? Is that
Absolutely.
acceptable?
Yes.
Okay, and because I want people to know that you, Krystal Dyan, and Summer Starr, my long-term friend in Hawaii and Maui, as you are a savant in creativity and caring, she's a savant in divine activism as a mother of two, and you have a daughter and a granddaughter. And so it's like, I really, in the book title, a working title is, what is it? Patriarchy, Authoritarianism, and the Role of the Creative Divine Feminine, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a learning for me, and I hope for others as well. And I want to post this today so people can get a sense of not just the project or the book, but just, maybe there's a taste of inspiration in here that someone can feel better about their lives and go about a more meaningful week and a month. So that's awesome.
We can all exalt our life to an art form.
Beautiful. You know, when you bring that up, it's like, it's so precious to me to hear that, because, you know, having left the monastic life back in '84, quite unwillingly, I was told to leave several times by the dictatorship, and eventually it's just hard to be a monk, and I would assume a nun too, in any place other than a monastery. It just doesn't work. And so I was back and forth to the West. So I disrobed and I came back to the West, and it was like, no offense to criticize anything, but it's like people think of monasteries where it's completely unartistic, or there's no real aesthetic. Everyone's bald, everyone's celibate, everyone meditates, but there is such a uniqueness to the empowered inner aesthete, if you will. They're not just mindful of phenomena.
Right.
They embody a unique expression of how they come to terms with which meditation in Burma and Buddhism is known as bhavana, the beautification of consciousness. It's not just being mindful of phenomena. It's a conscious decision-making process to inhabit the inner aesthete, mindfully, skillfully, in overcoming oppressive behaviors and thoughts. So it's sculpting consciousness. And it comes through in your physicality, the way you move, the way you bathe, the way you listen and speak, the way you sit. Although everyone is kind of in the same color robes and bald-headed and not touching and sitting a lot in silence, you see this artistry. Then coming back to the West, I found, as liberated as many people were, it was such a predictable culture. And people who thought of themselves as free, no offense to them, and I became wound up at myself, It's like, wow, this is what freedom looks like when you call it freedom.
Mhm.
And it was really the entrapment of this individualism and this kind of capitalistic accumulation consciousness. Cars going from here to there. You know, it was very odd for me. It's like, God, Alan, look at you. I haven't seen you in 4 years. It's like, May, I can't wait to get together with you. I can't wait to see you as well. And when do you want to get together? Well, let me look at my engagement book, and it'd be like, wait, I got an hour next week when we meet at the Mill Valley Coffee Shop. I'm going like, what, an hour? You got an hour, man. Wow, that is really rad. And so the idea of like getting down with someone is like, whoa, I know this is way back in the day. Now everyone's liberated, and so time doesn't matter, but it's like the buzz and the technological buzz. And it's like, even here in Bali today, I go to where I eat and drink and get my smoothies and tea, and I see so many people from around the world coming here for holiday, Krystal. I know this sounds crazy, but it's like, and it's stating the obvious, but I think married couples are glued to their flat screens more than they are to each other. Honeymooners are here glued to their flat screens than there's each other. It's like, whoa. So the insanity of pseudo connection. Anyway, your artistry has inspired me. Thank you from my heart. I look forward to our next conversation. I'll post this and send it to me, and I'll have it transcribed, and we'll move on through this project. Have a beautiful evening, and I look forward to our next conversation. And send anything along the way, by the way.
I will. Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
Take
Bye-bye,
care.
Krystal.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.